Hi, I'm Rob Moir, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ocean River Institute.
And hi, I'm Harper Dangler, and I'm the Relationships Manager here at the Ocean River Institute.
The Ocean River Institute started back in March of 2007 when I was asked to bring people together in support of a Massachusetts policy to manage the oceans, to essentially set up management areas for the ocean and bring all the different silos of government together. And to do that required a very vocal constituency of individuals, stakeholders, fishermen, users coming together and speaking out about it. And we found that it was an effective way to do that was through an organization that could, get the banners and get the tables reserved and the tables and stuff. So the bill did go through. We do have now a Mass Oceans Policy Act, which is the first in the nation, and the people have been coming together and planning now how to better manage the ocean. And so now one of the initiatives, well, what we learned in the process is that, and the way the Ocean River Institute works, is by listening locally and acting locally. So I found that the expression think globally, act locally is misleading, that too often people thinking globally are locally stupid. And it makes things difficult. And we must listen to local indigenous knowledges to find out and then collaborate with various different groups. So you end up with a more robust solution to the environmental problem. And so that's what the Ocean River Institute is all about. We took our name, the Ocean River, from Rachel Carson's book, The Sea About Us. In the end, she talks about, in the end, it is the ocean river flowing on that it flows on forever. And she's referring to the original Oceanus, the ocean river that Homer describes Achilles putting on his shield. Wrapped around the shield was Oceanus, the ocean river. And all the old maps of the world had Oceanus, the ocean river, wrapped around the known world with the sea monsters on it. I like Ocean River because it, to me, says systems thinking. We don't know where the world of the sea otter and the freshwater otter and the salmon is not either ocean or river, but it's some mixture of that. And so we must think systemically without boundaries. And we must listen locally. So that's what we've been doing, is listening locally. And Harper, why don't you tell us a bit about what we're doing these days?
Well, these days we are working on a number of issues having to do with the health of our oceans, the health of our coasts, whether it be up here in Massachusetts with Stellwagen Bank, or down on the Gulf Coast, which is now immediately being affected by the oil spill, or whether it be in Florida where the coasts are being affected by discharge from nutrient runoff from like fertilizers and stuff that people put on their lawns, or stuff that large farming countries put out. And so we're trying to get standards and a national ocean policy passed based on the Massachusetts success to make sure this stuff is better managed so that our environment is protected in a way that the environment's protected, while also we have areas that can be used by fishermen, areas that are set aside for business in a way that they all work together instead of a broken apart system that allows for things like the Gulf oil spill to happen.
One of the things New Zealanders would love to know is how the BP spill's actually playing out in the States.
It's just astounding, the problems. And it's the first time that, as you know, that we've had a spill from such great depth under the water. And because of that, the oil comes out, and under the pressure, it's going into little droplets. And the droplets, most of them are being found to be less than 1 part per million, like a half part per million. Tiny little things. It doesn't even color the water. But it can then be ingested by plankton, zooplankton, anything. And it may not hurt that animal, but it bioaccumulates, and it's going to be passed up the food chain. So the oil companies did do a test off of Norway to find out what would happen if something happened. And they found out that very little oil reached the surface. And so when the BP disaster happened, they told the government, oh, it's only 1,000 gallons, or barrels, don't worry about it, we've got it under control real quick. And they knew right then that it was 1,000 to 16,000, and now we know it's more. But it's been very difficult because of the effort by BP to downplay how much oil is coming in. And then the worst thing they could do was they sprayed endocrine disruptive, cancer-causing dispersants over the water, 1.1 million gallons of this toxic chemical to make the bits that came to the surface get out of sight again, so that they wouldn't be charged for it. Whereas it would have been much easier to clean up if it was just blotting oil up into the surface. So we're a little outraged. There's been a Herculean, enormous outpouring of people trying to make a difference. Unfortunately, they are suffering from toxic intolerance as they work with the materials, and it's going to be a long slog to fix.
Is there any sort of environmental collaboration, I suppose, between the groups to try and...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
It's a huge one, yeah.
So every week, starting in December, we were, because of Massachusetts' experience with ocean management, we have now promoting we're asking President Obama to declare a national ocean policy. And he has taken that to heart, and he appointed a task force that traveled around the nation and listened locally and talked locally and got local feedback about how can we have all the silos of government manage together and coherently the ocean policy stuff. And those, we would have weekly conversations with groups our size around the country. In particular, the Gulf Restoration Network in Louisiana was talking with us weekly. So then when the spill opened, we just put out an email today.
Of 17,500 people we call eco-stewards send out action alerts that tell them about the issues of the partners and people that we're working with. And so this week and the last several weeks, some of the actions have been about getting a national ocean policy passed and taking measures so that this kind of disaster does not happen again, and also ensuring that there is adequate, cleanup measures and containment. So this week we're pushing with our friends down at the Gulf Restoration Network to get Obama to federalize the cleanup, because BP, they know how to sort of try to minimize what actually is happening, and they know how to work their equipment, but they're not very good at containing the damage from the oil spill. They're not very good at keeping it from washing ashore and getting embedded into the salt marshes.
But what's unique about the Ocean River Institute is that we take directly what the Gulf Restoration Network, they've said we need 5 things from President Obama, and we just pick up the 5 things and say, here are the 5 things that we need. We don't say, well, we know what the right order should be, or maybe, it's just like the locals, this is what, they're on the ground, they're dealing with it day to day, they know what happens, and they need help getting the word out to a bigger source. And this is the service that Ocean River Institute does for many, many small grassroots organizations. And it's why I created the organization, is because many of these small organizations are living very hand to mouth, and they'll suddenly get a setback, and they'll get founded by a grant, and then the grantors go off to do something else, and suddenly they've lost their equipment or they've lost their leader, and they need help just getting through that little bit. And so we can put out the word to 17,000 people saying, here's an unusual circumstance for this group, and if a few people step in and help, it makes an enormous difference. I was at the post office down the street here, and I bumped into a colleague from the British Virgin Islands and said, help, they brought in the biggest developers in the world to put a mega yacht marina on top of the fisheries protected area, cement line mega yacht marina. And they want to put in golf courses on top of the 5 salt ponds that are pristine, and it'll punch through into Trellis Bay, which is turtle grass area and stuff. And the locals formed the Virgin Island Environmental Council to stop it, and they were told they had missed the comment period and that they would have to sue. And luckily, a young student there, Nomi Georges, had just written a paper, a senior thesis about such a situation. And so she and another young lawyer sued. And suddenly they had to bring in barristers from London to defend the case because they were suing the government for giving away the fisheries protected area. So I heard about this, and we put out a word to all our members saying, do you care about this? And we also go to public events. We went to the Earth Fest on the Esplanade, and other places in the country will be at public events, and we ask people to look at this letter and to sign it, but we mostly encourage them to add their own words about why is it important to them. I mean, we've seen a lot of people say, you got 37,000 signatures. That doesn't mean anything, but a few well-chosen words means a lot. And so suddenly they received these 4-inch binders of information. This is to the Premier about saving the British Virgin Islands, and our cover letter is just printed once, and then everything else is our personal comments from people around the world. About 60% are American and 35% are British, and some people just sign their names, and so they're at the end and stuff. But the point is that the Ocean River Institute prepared the documents in this format, bound them, with a big spine that reads it and stuff, and then had them hand-delivered to the different Ministry of Tourism, the Minister of Fisheries, as well as the town library. So it supported the Premier to stand up on this, and we know it was noted by the justice who was deciding the court case. And the court case was decided in our favor a year ago, and of course now the developers, having spent millions of dollars, are challenging that, and so we all have to go back into court again, and we have to raise the money to, the lawyers will do it pro bono. They're fabulous barristers, but they deserve to have their travel expenses to BVI back and forth, and so it does add up. And so we are working on some fundraising for the September defense, and I've been talking to Philippe Cousteau, the grandson of Jacques Cousteau, and he has agreed to come down to BVI at this time to help us raise money for the event, so that hopefully the yachters down there will help us raise some money. And the trick is to be responsive and opportunistic. And one source of knowing what's going on is talking to the legislators in Washington, D.C., the congressmen and Senate offices, particularly natural resources, energy, and commerce, that are doing work on oceans and the environment, and what bills do they have before them that need helps in passing. So Harper had mentioned this Clean Drinking Water Act that was having a tough time getting through the Natural Resources Committee. So we were able to turn around in a very short period of time, which they needed, lots of signatures for that. We had a harmful algal bloom red tide bill that talked about the dead zones that was introduced to the House floor, and suddenly the Republicans whipped against it, and they didn't tell their other Republicans who were for it that they were doing this. And so the bill went down, and working with Ocean Champions, another organization, and Ocean River Institute, we assembled 6,000 letters in 24 hours. And Kathy Castor from Tampa knew she's on the Rules Committee, and she knew the chair of the Rules Committee, Cheryl Pingree from Maine, and Pingree looked at the number of letters we had and found it in the rules to bring it back to the floor. And then Connie Mack is a Republican of Florida who's a big ocean conservationist, and he spoke on the floor about how important it is to Florida and the rest of the nation that we not have red tide problems, that we not have harmful algal blooms or these dead zones, and they're popping up along different parts of our coast. So the bill was defeated on Tuesday and turned around on Friday and passed. So it's important that the Ocean River Institute plays an important role of connecting legislators with a constituency that is responsive to the right kinds of things.